I never thought I would be stripped of my dignity in front of chandeliers and wedding music. Yet there I was, surrounded by golden walls and clinking glasses, while my own family, the very people who were supposed to protect me, turned me into a joke. The most painful part, my son had to witness it all. My name is Amelia Hartman. I'm 34 years old, a single mother living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I don't have much, just a small 2-bedroom apartment and a pair of hands that never stop working. During the day, I serve coffee at a shop down the street. At night, I man the front desk at a budget motel. The pay is tight, but I still manage to save every penny I can. The dress I wore that day, an old gown I had altered. It cost $700, 2 paychecks worth. Ethan's little suit, my 8-year-old son that was rented using the change I'd been collecting in a glass jar on the kitchen counter. I told myself that if Ethan smiled, all the old wounds might fade. He looked around the ballroom with sparkling eyes, believing that today was the day we would finally be embraced by our family. But I knew better. I always knew that. To them, I was nothing more than a walking bank account, someone they could drain when convenient, never once seeing me as part of the bloodline. Things began to unravel the moment I found out that the tiny house my father had left me, the only piece of property tied to my childhood, was no longer in my name. There was no warning, no phone call, not a single word. It was the bank that contacted me, informing me that the paperwork had been finalized, that the deed had been transferred, and that the house had been sold. I froze. It felt like my heart had been torn out of my chest. Who had forged my signature? Who had the nerve to erase the only legacy my father had left me as I began connecting the dots? The truth hit me. Everything pointed back to Vivian, my sister, the golden child, the one Mom always doted on, always protected, and now to throw the most extravagant wedding imaginable, one worth more than an entire house. They revealed their true colors. They sold my inheritance like it meant nothing, just to pay for a designer dress, white roses, and a string quartet to impress guests. I still remember my mother's voice, Margaret Collins, hissing over the phone, cold and sharp like a prosecutor delivering a verdict. You should know by now, in this family, image comes first. If you can't contribute, the least you can do is stay silent. You never really used that house. Vivian needs it more. I stood there, frozen. One arm around Ethan, the other clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free, and in my head, one bitter thought echoed, so this is it. I'm just the failure they get to push around. I've endured their condescension for years, but this time, when I looked into my son's confused eyes, I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I couldn't let Ethan grow up thinking that silence in the face of betrayal is the only way to survive. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, tears streaming endlessly. But beneath the pain, something else stirred, something colder, steadier, a vow. They declared war when they forged my signature, so I won't sit still. I'll finish this war on my terms. The only question that remains is, did they forget how strong I am, or did they simply never believe I'd fight back? I couldn't sit still. The next morning, as the New Mexico sunlight poured through the windows, I dropped Ethan off early at school and drove straight to my father's old house. The pale blue house on Maple Street had once been my childhood playground. But that day, the scene before me was completely foreign. A bright red sold sign hung on the front door, and strangers were hauling furniture out. "Excuse me, who are you?" a man in a moving company uniform asked. I choked. I used to live here. This is my house." He shrugged. "Not anymore. The papers are signed. The new owners are moving in soon." I turned away, my hand trembling as I dialed my mother. The phone rang 3 times before Margaret Collins picked up, her voice calm, as if nothing had happened. "Amelia, I'm busy getting ready for the wedding. What's going on?" I forced the words through clenched teeth. "My house. The one Dad left me, who forged the signature to sell it." There was a pause, then a sigh from Margaret. "Oh, don't be dramatic. You hardly ever visit that place. Vivian needed the money for the wedding, and this was the best way to keep the family's image intact." I let out a bitter laugh, my voice catching but sharp as glass. "Image, you sold my inheritance to buy a wedding dress, to serve French wine to guests that means more to you than your own daughter's dignity." Margaret's tone turned stern. "Watch your mouth. You need to understand that Vivian is our chance to restore this family's reputation. You failed. A single mother, unwanted by anyone. A small sacrifice isn't the end of the world." My blood boiled. A small sacrifice. That house held my memories, my childhood, Dad's legacy, and you erased it all for a few hours of luxury before she could respond. Vivian Hartman's voice chimed in through the speakerphone. Clearly, my mother had let her listen in. "You're being so theatrical. Amelia." Vivian scoffed. "This wedding is the biggest moment of my life. Who cares about that old place? I turned it into a grand celebration. You're lucky to even be invited." I gripped the steering wheel until my nails dug into my palm. "You took something that wasn't yours, Vivian. You erased me just to shine a little brighter. Do you even realize what you've done?" Vivian's voice was syrupy sweet, laced with poison. "I know exactly what I've done, and you should be grateful. Selling that house secured our spot at the most luxurious hotel in Santa Fe. You'll be dining under crystal chandeliers in that beautiful hall, all thanks to me." A heavy silence followed. I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears. I wanted to scream, to expose everything, but instead, I dropped my voice to a cold whisper. "You forgot one thing. Vivian, I have Ethan. He saw it all, and one day, he'll understand exactly who built their empire on someone else's sweat." Margaret snapped. "Enough, Amelia. Do not cause a scene. If you dare ruin this day for us, then don't ever call me your mother again." I let out a bitter chuckle. What difference would it make you gave up on me a long time ago? I hung up. In that moment, I knew I had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back, but one question pounded in my mind like a war drum. If they forged a signature to sell the house, how many more sins were still buried beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered? The phone had just hit the table when my small room sank into a heavy silence. Only the ticking of the clock remained dry and merciless. I sat there, head in my hands, feeling like the world had just collapsed all over again. I was used to my mother's coldness. I was used to Vivian's mocking smirks. But this time, this was different. This wasn't just another cruel comment at a family dinner. This was calculated, a forged signature, a clean theft of the only asset left behind by my father. I wanted to believe I was strong. But that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the wooden chair by the window, eyes blankly staring at the star-studded sky of New Mexico, One question kept circling in my head. Did they really think I would swallow this betrayal with a fake smile? I remembered Ethan's eyes the evening before. He didn't understand the paperwork. Not really. But he saw me trembling. He saw me choking on words. And in his eyes, I read fear. Fear that his mother was too weak to protect herself. For nearly 9 years, I carried everything. Since the day my father passed. Since the moment my boyfriend ran off when I was 5 months pregnant, I never allowed myself to fall. I worked 2 jobs. I paid every bill on time. I stayed up late mending his clothes, cooking breakfast with whatever little money we had. I made sure Ethan always had warmth in his life, even when I felt completely hollow inside. And yet, to my mother and Vivian, all those efforts were nothing but excuses to belittle me. In their eyes, I was a stain, the woman who got left, a living reminder of failure. Then came a strange moment from within the pain. I felt something else, an ember of energy, like a fire burning beneath cold ashes. I realized I was sitting in a shabby apartment, eyes swollen red, but my heart, it beat differently, faster, steadier. I whispered to myself, each word like a nail driven deep. Enough. I won't let them bury me again. I stood up and walked into Ethan's tiny room. He was curled up under the covers, breathing softly. I brushed his hair and whispered, I promise you, I will never let anyone take what belongs to us again. Never. Moonlight slipped through the curtains, casting a soft glow over Ethan's face. And at that moment, I understood that every battle I was about to face wasn't just for justice. It was so my son would know his mother was not the fragile woman they tried to make her out to be. Inside my mind, pieces began to fall into place. All those times I handed my mother money for medication, only to see Vivian flaunting a new handbag. The months I scraped by on repayments while they dined in upscale restaurants. I used to think I was making sacrifices to keep the peace. But really, I was just an easy source of money. They say silence is golden. But in my family, silence only made me pray. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand still shaking, but inside, something had changed. That lingering shame, that quiet voice saying maybe I deserved this, it was fading. In its place, a single thought burned clear. I will return every blow, every dollar, every tear. I didn't know exactly where to begin, but I knew I'd find a way. The only question now was when I rise. Will they have the courage to face the harsh truth they've tried so long to hide from the outside? I probably looked like just another freeloader, clinging to whatever was left of the family inheritance. But the truth was the exact opposite. I was the lifeline they had all clung to for years, only they never had the decency to admit it. I remember every number because each one carved a scar into my life. When Vivian was unemployed for 6 straight months, it was I who paid $2,800 every month for her fancy downtown apartment in Santa Fe. I worked overtime at the hotel, sometimes dozing off at the front desk, just to scrape together the money and send it before rent was due. Back then, it felt simple. My sister needed help. So I stepped up. Then there was Mom Margaret Collins. She called me in the middle of the night, her voice trembling. Amelia, I need some money for medical bills. I wired the money immediately, but I didn't even stop to ask questions. But just a few weeks later, I saw a photo of Vivian on social media, proudly holding a brand new Italian leather handbag. So, the medical debt was just a cover story. I also remember the most recent time Vivian came to my tiny apartment. eyes glossy with fake tears, saying she'd lose all dignity in front of her friends if she couldn't keep up the payments on her new car. I looked over at Ethan, hunched over his homework at the kitchen table, and my heart tore in two. But in the end, I pulled from my savings the money I had put aside for his future college tuition to pay off her loan. And now, those very people sold my house as if it were the most natural thing in the world. What choked me the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I wasn't just a walking ATM. I had become the doormat they wiped their feet on before stepping into the spotlight. That night, as I sorted through old bills in a wooden box under the bed, the whole picture came into focus. They never loved me. They only loved the benefits I brought, and I had let them take advantage of me for far too long. Ethan woke up in the middle of the night, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Mom, why aren't you asleep?" I smiled quickly, hiding the stack of bills behind my back. "It's nothing. Sweetheart, I'm just tidying up a bit." He walked toward me slowly, wrapped his arms around my waist, and whispered, "Don't be sad. Mom, I've grown up now. I'll protect you." Hearing those innocent words made my tears fall. I hugged him tightly and whispered, "No, Ethan, it's my job to protect you, and I promise, from now on, I won't let anyone take away anything that belongs to us ever again." At that moment, it was like something inside me had woken up. Every memory, every number, every quiet sacrifice turned into evidence of their ingratitude, their blatant betrayal, and I knew, if I stayed silent, they would keep going. Today it was the house. Tomorrow, it could be whatever little I had left. I wiped away my tears and whispered to myself, "It's time." If they had the nerve to humiliate me at a dinner table, then I would expose them to the world. The only question echoing in my mind was, where do I begin to turn this pain into my first strike back the next morning? I wasn't sitting blankly by the window anymore. I brewed myself a strong cup of coffee, set an old notebook in front of me, and wrote a bold line across the top. They declared war the moment they forged my signature. I'm just finishing what they started. Each word felt like a needle, stitching back the will that had been torn apart. I knew if I wanted to fight back, I couldn't rely on blind rage. I needed a plan. I needed proof. I dug out the wooden box from under my bed. Inside was a treasure trove of evidence bank transfer receipts to Vivian, deposit slips, credit card statements stamped with red late fee notices, and penalties I had racked up while covering their debts. I laid them out on the table, each sheet like a blade carving into my memory. I remembered the times Margaret had asked me to come by, saying I just needed to sign some routine family paperwork. I believed her. I signed without ever reading carefully. And now, it turned out those were the very documents they used to replicate my signature and sell the house. I felt foolish, but I also knew my gullibility would be the key to exposing them. I picked up the phone and dialed the one person I knew I could trust. Rachel Alvarez, an old high school friend, now a lawyer in Albuquerque. I had never asked Rachel for anything before, but this time, I needed her, Amelia. Rachel's voice sounded surprised as I explained everything. "Oh my God, they really forged your signature to sell the house." "I have a strong feeling they did," I said, my voice hoarse. "Rachel, I have receipts, bank documents, and credit statements. But I need someone who can show me how to turn these into a legal weapon." I heard papers rustling on her end. Then Rachel replied, "Bring everything to my office this weekend. We'll start by verifying the signatures. If they're forged, they'll be facing court." I closed my eyes, and for the first time, saw a glimmer of light. Not the endless despair I'd been stuck in, but a path forward. Rough, yes, but real. That evening, after tucking Ethan into bed, I sat beside him and whispered, "Son, we're not staying silent anymore. Mommy's going to take back what's rightfully ours." Ethan rubbed his eyes sleepily. "How?" "Mommy." I gave a faint smile. "With the truth, and with the courage I've kept hidden for too long." The next day, I started asking around quietly, carefully. I spoke to a few people in the Santa Fe community, those who had heard whispers about my family. One neighbor mentioned seeing Margaret and Vivian leaving the notary's office about a month ago. An old friend of my father's gently remarked, "They've only seen you as a walking wallet for years now." I wrote down every word, every small account. I wasn't afraid anymore. That night, as I gathered the documents into a folder, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My eyes weren't red from crying anymore. They were sharp, clear, and unfamiliar. I realized this was a version of Amelia they never expected to face. I whispered to myself, voice steady and sure, "Now the real party begins." But one big question still hovered in my mind. Was I truly ready for the consequences when their carefully staged performance begins to crack, right in front of everyone's eyes? Over the weekend, I drove 2 hours to Albuquerque to meet with Rachel. She glanced through the stack of documents and frowned. "Amelia, this signature, it's clearly forged. The handwriting doesn't match. If we submit this for verification, your mother and Vivian won't be able to deny it." Hearing those words felt like a chain had just fallen off my chest. Rachel began drafting a formal request for handwriting examination. I left her office with a thick folder in my bag, feeling like I was carrying a ticking bomb. That evening, I mailed copies of several documents to the anonymous tip line of the local newspaper. No lengthy explanation was needed. Just one line. The house on Maple Street was sold using forged documents. The rightful heir is me, Amelia Hartman. 2 days later, the whispers began. A small blog in Santa Fe published an article questioning the shady sale of the Collins-Hartman family home. At first, just a few dozen shares, but it spread faster than I had expected. The community was small, but Santa Fe had always been a place of rumors, and rumors are fuel for fire. I sat in my apartment, opened my laptop, and watched as comments started to pour in. People were gossiping, even calling out my mother by name, Margaret Collins. The woman who once boasted about preserving her family's honor is now caught up in document forgery. I let out a dry laugh. So now, Mother's reputation had started to crack. That afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store. At the checkout, I ran into one of Mother's acquaintances. She looked at me, lips pressed tight, then leaned toward the woman next to her and whispered. I heard the word clearly, scandal. I had never felt such satisfaction. For years, I had dodged their disdainful looks, but now they were the ones avoiding mine, ashamed on behalf of Margaret and Vivian. That evening, Vivian called. Her voice had lost its usual arrogance. "Amelia, what did you do? People are talking nonstop. My friends are asking questions. Do you have any idea how this is affecting the wedding?" I turned on the speakerphone and scoffed. "Oh, so your wedding is more important than the law. They're not gossiping. Vivian, they're simply seeing the truth you tried to hide." She fell silent. I heard Margaret's voice in the background. "Don't answer her. Amelia just wants to ruin everything." I replied slowly. "Mom, I don't need to ruin anything. You and Vivian dug the hole and jumped in yourselves." I hung up. Alone in my tiny apartment, I laughed bitterly, but also with a sense of release. For the first time, I wasn't trembling after a conversation with them. For the first time, I held the upper hand. The next 2 days, I said nothing more. No public statements, no clarifications. I simply observed, and I saw the cracks spreading. Vivian's guests started canceling their RSVPs, and some wedding vendors began requesting contract confirmations. I sat by the window of my apartment, watching the city of Santa Fe bathe in the deep red glow of sunset, and I thought, this is only the prelude. They have no idea the real storm is coming. The only question I kept to myself, will I remain calm enough to steer the storm? Or will I be swept away by the chaos I've unleashed Monday morning? I received a call from Rachel. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like a gavel pounding on a wooden table. "Amelia, the judge agreed to sign the temporary order. The entire house sale is now frozen. All associated accounts have been locked until the investigation is over." I stayed silent for a few seconds. A smile crept across my lips. Finally, justice was no longer just a distant dream. Just hours later, I started hearing rumors spreading all over Santa Fe. Some of Vivian's wedding vendors began pulling out, citing concerns over legal risk. A decor company sent Vivian an email, refusing to continue preparing for the wedding. The reason was clearly stated: payment account has been frozen. My phone exploded with notifications. Messages, missed calls, the family group chat buzzing nonstop. I didn't open any of them. I just sat by the window, sipping my coffee, enjoying the chaotic symphony they had created for themselves. That afternoon, I got a long message from Vivian. "Amelia, are you insane? Do you have any idea how much I've already put down? Tens of thousands of dollars? Now it's all gone up in smoke. My friends are laughing at me. Are you happy now?" I stared at the screen. My hands trembled, but not out of fear, but out of satisfaction. I typed back exactly 7 words. "This is only the beginning. Buckle up." That evening, Margaret called. This time, her voice wasn't cold or commanding. It was frantic, fractured. "Amelia, what did you do? They froze my accounts. I can't withdraw any money. I can't pay my bills. They're going to cancel Vivian's wedding. Are you trying to destroy this family?" I took a deep breath and kept my voice calm. "No, Mother, I'm just protecting what's mine. You chose betrayal. Now face the consequences." She screamed into the phone, but I hung up. I didn't shake like I used to. I let her drown in the very chaos she had created. The next day, the local newspaper officially ran the story: Santa Fe court freezes suspicious transaction involving Maple Street property. The article was accompanied by a photo of Vivian in a wedding dress, taken at an upscale boutique. A picture that once drew admiration has now become a laughingstock. I sat in my small apartment, watching Ethan do his math homework. He looked up and asked, "Mom, why are people online saying Aunt Vivian is in trouble?" I gently ran my fingers through his hair. "Because when people do wrong, they have to pay the price. Ethan, that's the rule." He nodded and went back to writing, while I sat there feeling a strange, rare peace settle inside me. But that peace didn't last long. A new email arrived from Rachel. "Brace yourself. Your family will strike back." They won't sit still while the truth comes to light. I leaned back in my chair and took a long breath. I knew, and I was ready. The only question circling in my mind was this: when they're backed into a corner, will they beg for forgiveness or come after me even harder? My phone buzzed nonstop all morning. Messages from Mom, from Vivian, even from relatives who hadn't bothered to check in for years. I ignored them at first, but once Ethan left for school, I opened a few. The first message was from Margaret, Amelia. "Stop this now. You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to destroy this family. If you still have any love left, withdraw the lawsuit." I let out a dry laugh. Family, did they remember family when they sold my house behind my back? The next message, a long-winded one, was from Vivian. "You're ruining the happiest day of my life. I've spent my entire youth building this image. Now my friends and coworkers see me as a joke. Do you want to see me crumble before you're satisfied?" I took a deep breath. What I felt inside was strange, maybe a bit of pity, but far more bitterness. I typed only 4 words in reply: "You did this yourself." That afternoon, I decided to meet them face to face. I wasn't going to let them paint me as a coward. As I stepped into my mother's house, the air felt heavy, as if a storm was about to break. Margaret stood in the center of the living room, her face flushed red, while Vivian sat on the couch, eyes swollen from crying. "Happy now?" Margaret snapped. "The family's honor is gone. I can't show my face to my friends." I looked her straight in the eye. "You never cared when my honor was shredded in front of a crowd. Why cry about yours now?" Vivian shot up, her voice shrill. "You're selfish. You've always been jealous of me. That's why you're trying to ruin this. I never took anything from you." I cut her off, throwing a stack of receipts onto the table. The slap of paper slicing through the air was sharp as a blade. "Stop lying. This is proof of every penny I paid for you. Rent, car payments, credit card debt. You drained me dry. Vivian. And now you dare say you took nothing." The room fell silent. Margaret trembled, trying to salvage the moment. "Amelia, I was wrong, but you're the older sister. You should be more forgiving." I laughed, a harsh, hollow sound that echoed through the room. Forgiving fraud, betrayal, forged documents, no. Mom, I'm not your walking wallet anymore. Vivian burst into tears and collapsed to her knees, her voice barely holding together. "Please, don't ruin my wedding. I'll pay you back. Everything. Just stop. Please." I looked at my sister, her shoulders trembling under the pale yellow light. A part of me wanted to reach out, to forgive her. But then I remembered the look in Ethan's eyes when the entire room laughed at me. I remembered the night I sat mending an old dress while she twirled around in a wedding gown worth thousands of dollars. I took a deep breath and turned away. "It's too late. Vivian, learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I'm not your crutch anymore." As I reached the door, I heard my mother scream behind me, "You'll regret this. Amelia, you're dragging this whole family down." I answered softly, without turning back. "You and Vivian already jumped. I just let go." Outside, the Santa Fe wind cut colder than usual, but my chest felt lighter. I knew the battle was far from over, but for the first time, things were clear. The balance of power had shifted, and the question still hung in my mind. Would they keep begging, or would they finally show their true teeth? If you're still listening and feel anger or empathy for Amelia, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Bitter Scars so you don't miss the hidden layers behind every story. I knew that staying silent would only allow them to keep shaping their own version of the story. If they could turn me into the troublemaker in everyone's eyes, then I had to turn the truth into a light so bright no one could hide behind the shadows. The next night, I opened my laptop. I wrote a long letter not just to my mother or Vivian. I wrote it for everyone. Hello. My name is Amelia Hartman. I used to stay silent because I thought family was something you shouldn't expose. But the truth is they forged my signature to sell the house on Maple Street, the property my father left behind. They called me a walking wallet. And even though I covered thousands of dollars in debts, rent, and even a car for them, they never stopped treating me with contempt. Here is the evidence. I attached images, bank transfer records, credit card receipts, and forged documents. Every piece of paper was once a scar, but now I was turning them into weapons. I posted it publicly in a large Santa Fe community group. Within hours, the post exploded. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares. People stopped whispering behind my back. They started talking openly. Did Margaret Collins really forge documents? Vivian took money from her own sister to live lavishly. I sat in front of the screen, and it felt like a storm had arrived. But this time, I wasn't the one being swept away. I was the one steering it. The next morning, I received a message from Rachel. Amelia, your post made a huge impact. A few people contacted my office, saying Margaret borrowed money from them and never paid it back. The truth is unraveling. Reading that message, I felt a mix of pain and satisfaction. For years, I thought I was alone. It turns out that I wasn't the only one betrayed by them. By noon, I got an email from a wedding vendor. The subject line was simple: contract termination with Vivian Hartman. The body read, "We are unable to continue working with a client involved in a forgery investigation. We are terminating the contract effective immediately." I pictured Vivian's face when she read that email. Maybe, for the first time, the glow around her had begun to crack. In the afternoon, my phone rang. A man's voice unfamiliar, tense. "Is this Amelia? I'm Callum Rhodes's father. I just wanted to say thank you for your courage. My son is reevaluating everything. He doesn't want to marry into a dishonest family." I gripped the phone tighter, heart pounding. So Callum was seeing the truth, too. That evening, I sat in my small apartment. Ethan was beside me, working on his homework, while I read through the comments on my post. Some people called me a lioness. Others said my story brought back their own pain. I didn't respond. I just sat there, letting their words wash over me like a balm after years of silence. But then, a cold thought crept in. The truth had been exposed. But would Margaret and Vivian back down, or would they spiral in desperation and drag me into their next storm? That morning, Rachel's message came earlier than usual. "Amelia, Callum officially withdrew the engagement. He filed a petition to cancel the marriage at the Santa Fe courthouse this morning." I read those words over and over again. Part of me was surprised. Another part felt a quiet relief. Finally, someone had the courage to say it out loud. They couldn't stay tied to a family built on lies. The news spread fast. By noon, social media was filled with pictures of Callum walking out of the bridal shop, his face cold as ice. Some whispered, "He got out. Lucky he figured it out in time." I sat in my little apartment, listening to Ethan talk about his math quiz, and my heart clenched. The family my son once innocently believed would welcome him with open arms had shattered like a crystal glass dropped on tile. But I knew that was the price of truth. Later that afternoon, I received a call from someone I never expected Callum himself. His voice was tired, but steady. "Amelia, I'm sorry. I couldn't go through with marrying into a counterfeit family. I believed Vivian, but after everything that's come out, I realized I was about to walk straight into a trap. Thank you for speaking up, even if it cost you everything." I was speechless. Finally, someone acknowledged I wasn't crazy, wasn't making things up. I simply said, "You don't owe me thanks. You just saved yourself." Meanwhile, Margaret was frantically calling relatives, desperate for someone to take her side. But no one wanted to get involved anymore. The same people who used to flatter her at dinner parties now kept their distance, afraid of being tainted by scandal. I imagined her alone in that empty house, her accusations echoing into silence, unanswered. Vivian was different. She sobbed on social media, posting long rants claiming she was sabotaged by a jealous sister. But instead of sympathy, the comments were flooded with outrage. "You took advantage of your sister for years, and now you're blaming her. Someone like you wants to be a wife, a mother." I read those words, feeling both pain and release. Pain because Vivian was still my sister. Release because justice no longer lived behind courtroom doors. It had awakened in the hearts of those who watched. That night, as I took Ethan on a walk around the neighborhood, he suddenly asked, "Mom, is Aunt Vivian still part of our family?" I froze, then knelt to meet his eyes. In that clear, innocent gaze, I saw a question much bigger than his years. What really makes a family? I swallowed hard, then answered softly, "Blood doesn't always mean family. Ethan, family is the people who love you and respect you." Ethan nodded, his little hand gripping mine tighter. I knew, from that moment on, he would never look at his grandmother or aunt the same way again. Back in the apartment, I stood by the window, watching the lights of Santa Fe flicker through the night. My family had just officially broken apart, beyond repair, beyond return. But there was still one thing left to do to face them. Not from behind a screen, not through silence, but face to face, where they could no longer scream into the void without being seen. I would look them in the eye and say everything. The only question echoing in my head was, when that day comes, will they bow their heads in acceptance? Or will they still cling to their final, desperate lies? The day I chose to return to my mother's house, the sky over Santa Fe was a dull gray, as if the entire city was holding its breath. I didn't go alone. Ethan was at school, and I wanted to keep my son far away from this final storm. When I walked in, Margaret was already seated in the living room, no longer carrying the commanding presence she once had. She looked small, her face etched with exhaustion. Vivian was leaning against the staircase railing, her eyes puffy but still trying to maintain a defiant air. Margaret spoke first, her voice raspy. "Amelia, we need to talk. You've dragged this family through the mud. Are you satisfied now?" I sat down in the chair across from her, my voice calm, but every word heavy as stone. "No, Mother, I'm not satisfied. I'm just tired. Tired of pretending we're a loving family, when in truth, it's always been a stage for you and Vivian to shine." Vivian stepped down, her voice tight. "You always think you're better than everyone, but really, you're just jealous. You couldn't stand seeing me loved, So you tried to ruin me. I looked her straight in the eyes, my voice cold as steel. Jealous Vivian, you've drained me dry. I paid your rent and your car debt, and I even helped you stay on your feet when no one else cared. I did all of that, only to be met with public humiliation and scorn. If you call that jealousy, then you truly understand nothing about sisterhood. Margaret interrupted, her voice trembling. Amelia, I only wanted to protect our reputation. You're a single mother. People talk. I had to choose the child who could keep the family's image intact. I shot up from my seat, my eyes blazing. Reputation. What about my dignity for years? You let people laugh at me and used me as your scapegoat. You never once stood up for me, never once shielded me. So why should I protect you? The living room fell into a heavy silence. Vivian lowered her gaze, her hand trembling as she clutched her dress. Margaret leaned back into the chair, eyes closed, as if trying to escape reality. I took a deep breath, then lowered my voice not with anger anymore, but with certainty. I didn't come here to apologize or listen to more excuses. I came to make this clear from now on. I am no longer bound by this lie. I am no longer a name for you to smear, or a wallet for Vivian to drain. I am free. Vivian looked up, tears falling, her voice barely audible. You're really going to leave me behind. I met her eyes, my voice sharp as a blade. No, Vivian, I'm simply putting you back where you belong, responsible for your own life. With that, I turned and walked to the door. There were no pleas to stay, no reconciliatory hugs like in the movies, just the sound of the door slamming shut, firm as a final period. On the way home, my heart was pounding, but this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from liberation. I knew, when that door closed behind me, another door inside me had opened. The only question still echoing in my mind, would I have the courage to keep living without needing their approval ever again? That evening, when I returned to my small apartment, the lights of Santa Fe were already glowing. The whole city shimmered like a tapestry embroidered with thousands of golden lights. I sat down on the sofa, my back pressed against the worn-out fabric, and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. Ethan ran out from the bedroom, proudly showing off a picture he had just finished drawing. A small house, with the two of us standing at the front door, under a sky full of stars. I took the paper, tears rolling down my cheeks, but this time, they weren't out of sorrow. It was relief. Mom, this house is ours. Right? Ethan asked, his eyes wide and innocent. I nodded and smiled. Yes, Ethan, home is where you and I are. No one can ever take that away. Oh, at that moment, I realized that my worth wasn't defined by what my mother or Vivian used to say. It wasn't measured by the judgmental eyes of outsiders, or by the house on Maple Street that they sold off so cheaply. My worth lived in Ethan's trusting eyes, in every peaceful breath I had finally reclaimed. As night fell, I turned off all the lights and sat in the dark. Strangely, the silence no longer made me feel lost. It used to mean loneliness, abandonment. But now, silence felt like a gift. I listened to my heartbeat steady, a certain reminder that I had survived the storm and was still standing. I remembered what my mother once said, "You are the failure of this family." Back then, that sentence hung over me like a sentence, forcing me to live hunched over, trying to prove her wrong. But now, I didn't need to prove anything. I no longer sought validation from those who never respected me to begin with. I smiled at the realization. Freedom wasn't about being forgiven by my family. It was about no longer waiting for a forgiveness that was never coming. The next day, I took Ethan to school, then stopped by the cafe where I worked. I realized that even the repetitive routine carried a new meaning. Every cappuccino I made wasn't just a paycheck. It was proof that I could provide for my son with my own 2 hands. My coworkers looked at me and noticed something different. There was no more lowered gaze, no more hesitation, just calm confidence. One of the girls laughed and said, "Amelia, you look lighter somehow." I simply replied, "Yeah, for the first time in years, silence actually feels peaceful." On the way home, the Santa Fe wind blew fiercely. I pulled my coat tighter, but inside, I no longer felt cold. I had found a solid place to stand right within my own heart. And then, in that stillness, a thought sparked. Maybe my story doesn't end with me. Maybe my rising up could become the beginning for others still trapped in invisible chains. One question lingered in my mind. Could my courage be enough to ignite a greater awakening? Just a few days after I went public with the truth, my life took a turn in the most unexpected way. Messages flooded my inbox faster than I could read them. They weren't just congratulations or praise. Some were shaky, heartfelt words from complete strangers. "Amelia, I was financially exploited by my sister for years. I thought I was the only fool. But your story made me realize I'm not alone. Thank you for speaking up for us. My mother once forced me to sign a land transfer, and I've lived in shame ever since. Now I want to stand up." I read each line with trembling hands. I didn't know these people, but we shared the same wounds. And now, because of one small act on my part, they felt they had the right to speak out. One morning, as I was dropping Ethan off at school, a woman stopped me at the gate. She looked to be around 40, thin, with dark circles under her eyes. "You're Amelia, right?" Her voice quivered. I nodded. She grabbed my hand. "Thank you. I read your article. I'm also fighting my own family. Your story gave me the strength to file my case." I stood in silence, my chest tightening. I never imagined that telling my truth would reach so many people. That evening, I spoke with Rachel. She had just finished another call and smiled at me. "Amelia, you know what my law office took on 3 new cases this week. People are coming forward because they feel someone has cleared the way, and that someone is you." I was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Rachel, I never wanted to be a symbol. I just wanted peace." Rachel looked at me with gentle eyes. Sometimes the people who only want peace end up creating real change, because they speak from pain, not ambition. That night, I sat out on my apartment balcony, watching the twinkling lights stretch across Santa Fe. The air was cool, the breeze steady. I felt like a new current was forming, sweeping away years of silence and dust. Ethan stepped out, wrapped in a blanket, and sat beside me. "Mom, people at school said you're a lioness. What does lioness mean?" I held him close and whispered, "It means a strong female lion, the one who protects her pride." Ethan smiled and rested his head on my shoulder. "I'm proud to have you as my mom." I pulled him in tighter, and in my eyes, a different kind of light began to shine faith. I knew this story wasn't over. The hardest part was still ahead: the court, the law, and the scrutiny of society. But at least, I no longer walked this road alone. And the question waiting just ahead of me was this: as the court date approaches, will justice truly stand by my side? Or will they still find a way to twist the law and escape the price they owe? The court date came faster than I expected. That morning, the Santa Fe County Courthouse was packed. Local reporters were present, and a few of the people who had messaged me their support showed up and sat in the back rows, their eyes full of hope. I sat beside Rachel, clutching the case file tightly. My heart was pounding not just because I was about to face my mother and Vivian, but because I knew this moment would determine more than just my own dignity. It would become a lesson for Ethan someday. When Margaret and Vivian walked in, the room stirred. They no longer had the radiance of that ruined wedding day. Margaret wore a dark coat, her face drawn and pale. Vivian sat beside her, eyes sunken with dark circles, lips pressed into a tight line. The judge struck the gavel. His voice was calm but commanding. This case concerns allegations of forged signatures and the unlawful transfer of property. Plaintiff, Amelia Hartman. Rachel stood and delivered her statement clearly and concisely. Each piece of evidence appeared on the screen: mismatched signatures, wire transfer receipts, and emails from the notary. I sat silently, listening to every word, as if the years of tears I had endured were finally being translated into the language of law. Then came the other side. Their attorney tried to pivot. This is merely a misunderstanding within the family. My client believed she had the authority to make decisions for the common good. I smirked. The common good for years. That phrase had only meant one thing: I paid. They benefited. The judge frowned and requested a signature comparison with my verified samples. A handwriting expert took the stand and declared with certainty, the signature on the house sale contract does not match. It is a forgery. The courtroom erupted. I caught a glimpse of Vivian flinching, her eyes wide in panic, while Margaret lowered her head, her shoulders trembling. At last, the judge struck the gavel again and announced firmly, the court rules the house sale invalid. The property on Maple Street shall be returned to its rightful owner, Amelia Hartman. Furthermore, the case of forgery will be forwarded to the Criminal Investigation Unit. This hearing is adjourned. The sound of the gavel cut through the air like a blade. I sat frozen for a few seconds before tears welled up. Not from glee, but because justice, at long last, had spoken. Margaret turned to me, her bloodshot eyes wanting to say something, but no words came out. Vivian burst into tears and ran out of the courtroom. They had lost everything: their pride, their credibility, and the illusion of control they once clung to. I stood up, my legs shaky but each step steady. Rachel smiled and squeezed my hand. You did it, Amelia. Not just for yourself, but for so many others. Outside the courthouse, the Santa Fe wind blew hard, carrying the chill of the season's change. I looked up at the gray sky, my thoughts swirling. This victory was sweet, but tinged with bitterness. After all, they were still my mother and my sister. And the truth is, no court ruling can mend a broken family. That night, as I tucked Ethan into bed, he whispered, "Mom, is everything over now?" I brushed his hair gently and whispered back, "Yes, sweetheart, it's over. But our new journey is only just beginning." After the trial, I spent many sleepless nights, not out of fear anymore, but because my mind kept swirling in a strange mixture of emotions, relief, and emptiness. I had won. The house on Maple Street was returned to me. My name was cleared, and the truth came to light. But at the same time, the last ties that bound our family had burned away. No more mother, no more sister, no more shared roof to cling to. One afternoon, I took Ethan back to visit the old house. The wooden door had faded. The porch was covered in dust. But as I stepped inside, my heart trembled as if my father was still somewhere in there, smiling down at us. Ethan ran around, shouting, "Mom, is this really our house now?" I nodded, my eyes stinging. "Yes, Ethan, our house. And this time, no one can ever take it away from us." We spent the whole day cleaning. I dusted the shelves while Ethan wiped down the old window panes. Every laugh that echoed through that house felt like a brand new melody, erasing the dark echoes of the past. I realized then that a true beginning isn't about finding a perfect place. It's about turning a scarred place into a home with love. In the weeks that followed, I began to rebuild our lives. The cafe and hotel jobs were still exhausting, but I walked into them with a new mindset. No longer bowed by shame, I looked people straight in the eye and saw they looked back at me with newfound respect. One evening, as I sat on the balcony with Ethan curled up beside me under a blanket, he asked, "Mom, do you still feel sad about Grandma and Aunt Vivian?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then smiled. "No, sweetheart, I'm not sad anymore. Some bridges have to be burned, so we never go back to where we came from." Ethan nodded, then rested his head on my shoulder. In that moment, I knew I hadn't lost everything. I had just found the most important thing, freedom. I no longer waited for an apology call, no longer hoped for a healing hug. I chose to forgive in a different way by forgiving myself for enduring too much for too long. And from that very second, I felt a true beginning. When I looked up, the sky over Santa Fe was covered in stars. I thought about everything we'd been through, the sleepless nights, the tears, the painful falls. It all led to one thing's strength. This story doesn't end in bitterness. It ends in light, in a child's laughter, and in a reminder carved deep in my heart sometimes to save yourself. You must be brave enough to burn the rotting bridge behind you. And that was my new beginning. Some scars don't live on the skin. They're etched deep into the heart. Amelia's story isn't just a legal battle. It's a journey of reclaiming herself from a woman who was dismissed, used, and belittled, to a mother who stands tall and teaches her son what honor truly means. Betrayal can tear a family apart, but it can also spark rebirth. And when Amelia let go of those toxic ties, she didn't lose. She truly found something: peace, freedom, and a brighter future for the two of them. If you carry scars like these, remember you're not alone. Let bitter scars be the place where you find strength. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this story because someone out there might just need a spark of light